Alright, so we're going to be talking about the Great Strike of 1877. And as I state here, the movement from unorganized labor to something calling for 8 hours and better working conditions. It's kind of a crazy thing in America, but to think about labor unions, you also have to think about the start of big labor and big business. And guess what? With that, we go to railroads. It just so happens that the same guy who signed the, who signed the Declaration of Independence, one of the guys who signed that, also was one of the Baltimore and Ohio's first directors, and he thought the railroad was important as the Declaration of Independence. Crazy idea, I know. But anyway, that's the idea. Railroads are really important in America, and this guy knew it right from the beginning. We have a fairly slow period, about 20 years. Not a whole lot of track is laid, and then after the Civil War, and of course during the Civil War, there was lots of track laid. You notice a big jump, or a big break, I should say, between 1873 and 1877. With all this major expansion of the railroads, you had a panic. You had too many rail lines, and rail companies were overextended. They had more loans than they could pay. So one big businessman, Jay Cooke, went bankrupt. That failed. That brought about failed banks, which brought about other failed banks, which damaged already weak companies. So, railroads really important to America. Railroads are going through hard times. Banking systems are going through hard times. As a result, 3 million unemployed. Those that were working didn't work that much, and those that had jobs, their wages were cut. So, really, really tough period in the country. Railroads still incredibly important, but it's operating under really tough conditions. So what happens is it's the very heart and life of existence of the commercial system, right? As the Chicago Tribune says, and things are still traveling. Things are still getting done. The investors are still getting paid. Here I have this little notice about $4 billion invested in railroads where the national debt's only $2 billion. Basically what I'm trying to say is railroads are bigger than the government in some ways, right? There's just this, I can't stress it enough. They're an incredibly important part of the American system. The workers are not getting paid, though. Their wages are being cut. So, railroads really important. Hard times around the country, but the workers are feeling it more than anybody else. Here's just another way to look at these dollar cuts. I don't know about you guys, but I used to pay a lot of my income in rent, and if I had a half decrease in my salary, I would be hard-pressed to do anything but basically pay my rent. So this would be obviously tough. Then they didn't work that much. They went on railroads, worked on the railroads. They'd go down the track 100 miles, and then they would have to wait to get another train to come back, and they'd have to stay in a hotel at a high rate and spend all their money, or just sleep in the in the outside. So hard conditions. There were some unions for the railroads before the strike of 1870, or the panic of 1873. But after that panic, the companies can do what they want. They can hire replacement individuals because everybody needs a job. So there's very few there's very few unions, period. Those are national unions, and there's only one railroad union going into 1877, but that's infiltrated by company agents, and they basically break up that union. They fire those union workers because there's no real protections for them. So there's no direction. There's no national organization behind this strike. In July of 1877, there's another 10% dividend to stockholders. The very next day, there's a wage cut for the workers. This followed right after a previous wage cut. in addition to the other wage cuts we've been talking about. Okay, so guess what happens? People freak out. There's a spontaneous uprising of the workers. This is on railroads all across the country. In a couple places, it turns into a bigger strike of all the working class people in the city, and it really causes some people to panic. What I want to do here real quick through the wonders of digital history, we're going to look at a view of the Great Strike, 1877. This is from the Railroads and the Making of Modern America site. I'll put a link up to it. All right, we're going to start on the 16th. It starts here in little old Martinsburg. It jumps to Baltimore, and then just watch it spread around the upper Midwest. Oops, I started. All right, here I'm going to start it. All right, there's the days going on the bottom, and boom, Baltimore explodes. Boom, St. Louis, Toledo, Columbus, Chicago, and Chicago stays that way for a while. All right, I'm going to play it. Oh, it just keeps going. So I think it's really interesting how in the very beginning it goes from Martinsburg and it spreads west and east, and then Baltimore really just blows up. Then it kind of jumps those cities. 15,000, that's the number we have here. When it gets really big, we're talking about 15,000 people, strikers, sympathizers in the streets. That's a fairly large figure, don't you think? Okay, enough of that. So it's a big strike, causes people to freak out. There's damage to property. This is from Pittsburgh. They call it the Pittsburgh riots. It's pretty focused on the railroads, but there's some other things that happen. The militia is called in. The federal troops are called in when the militia can't control it in some places. Some places, government officials meet with the strikers and they resolve it peacefully, but of course we like to talk about the violent stuff. This is a quote from a Baltimore and Ohio Railroad employee talking about how horrible it is for his kids. He's got a tough life. His family's got a tough life. And so these are the conditions that make people spontaneously just explode when they can't take it anymore. The New York Times doesn't look at them as quite so sympathetic. This is my favorite right here. We got what? Rapscallions, brigands, robbers, riffraff, terrible felons and idiots. Drunken section men, labor reform agitators, a dangerous class of people. You get the idea. President Hayes, the President of the United States, says they've been put down by force, but he thinks we should try and do something, right? By judicious control of the capitalists, by wise general policy to end or diminish the evil. Because these railroad strikers are good men by and large, he says. Karl Marx, who famously wrote the Communist Manifesto, says, I hope this is the creation of a serious workers' party in the U.S. It doesn't turn out that way, but for the middle class and for the upper class, the Great Strike really scares them. For the working people of America, it has a couple different impacts. All right, so we're just going to talk about this postscript, big, broad brushstrokes. I'm going to talk in huge generalizations and skip lots of detail. So there you have it. The Knights of Labor form 1878, right after the Great Strike. Initially, they're a secretive organization because they didn't want to be infiltrated by the railroad company spies like it happened in the past. They wanted to reform all of society. They were open to anybody, to women, to African Americans, and here's their motto. That is the most perfect government in which an injury to one is the concern of all. They are a cooperative commonwealth. They have big, big, big hopes and dreams, and it's very difficult to realize these big hopes and dreams, right? It's hard to change society. Society is changing, however. This is a wheat farm in the 1880s. You can't see it very well, but there's a little guy right there on a McCormick reaper, and he is cutting down his field. It's him and this other guy bundling the stuff up. this used to be an army of individuals, and now that army of individuals who used to cut hay now live in the cities. So we have all kinds of changes happening in the countryside, in the cities. More and more people are working for wages. And here is that McCormick Reaper factory in Chicago, connected to the railways, billowing smoke. There's a little cute sailing ship. More rail over here. And this is the industrial city for lots and lots and lots of people. In 1886, in front of the McCormick factory, during a May Day celebration — May Day is kind of the official day of labor agitation, labor remembrance, labor organization — there was an assembly. Knights of Labor were there, other people were there, some bombs were thrown, people get killed, it's a huge riot, scares America once again. And this really discredits the Knights of Labor. So this makes labor unions seem like not such a great thing. They're radical. They want to change society. They're blowing stuff up. You get the drift, right? Now, this isn't all totally true, but this is how it feels to the American people. So out of the Haymarket affair, and the periodization is really nice and tidy. It's not always that way in history, but this is how we're going to tell you this story. Samuel Gompers, right after the Haymarket affair, forms the American Federation of Labor. He focuses on skilled workers. It's not open to anybody. It's open to those workers that are difficult to replace because they're skilled. He focuses on, check it out right here, 8 hours, right? A simple thing, something that you can negotiate in a contract. Their slogan, labor conquers all. A little bit simpler than, this Commonwealth society. And we call this pure and simple unionism, or bread and butter unionism. Simple gains, right? So what have we done? We've talked about the Great Strike and this huge spontaneous labor uprising in America. It scares people. It suggests the need for organization. Out of that, you get the Knights of Labor who try and reform society. They're open to everyone. It's really idealistic. Doesn't bring about too much change, and is really damaged by the Haymarket affair. Then you get the American Federation of Labor. Samuel Gompers is going to still be trying to get his 8-hour day when we're in World War I in 1916. So check it out. We're going to see old Samuel Gompers still on the scene. There are, however, other places where we do see labor achieving gains along these simple bread and butter union ideas. All right, that's enough for this. Have lots of fun out there.